Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the biggest stories in the global economy, India's ambition to become a $10 trillion powerhouse. $10 trillion. I mean, this is the number you hear everywhere, right? It's the massive GDP goal that really defines India's economic aspirations. But what's the real story behind all those headlines? Well, using some incredible insights from former Indian Finance Secretary Subhash Garg, we're going to look past the hype and try to understand the complex reality of what's going on. Okay, so first things first, let's dig into where this ambitious goal even came from and what the original timeline was supposed to be. So this whole plan was officially announced back in the 2019-20 budget. The idea was to take the economy from its base of about $2.7 trillion, hit a $5 trillion milestone by 2025, and then reach the big one, $10 trillion by the mid-2030s. Just think about that for a second. We're talking about nearly quadrupling the entire economy's size in about 15 years. That's a staggering goal. Now, a huge part of the optimistic narrative is this claim that India is the world's fastest growing major economy. But as we're about to see, whether that's true or not, well, it all depends on how you measure it. Okay, so if you look at what's called real GDP growth, which basically measures growth in a country's own currency, India is without a doubt leading the pack. I mean, an average of over 7% post-COVID, that just blows past China and the US. And this is the number that generates all those positive headlines. But here's the crucial point. To compare economies on the world stage, apples to apples, you need a common yardstick. And that yardstick is usually the US dollar. This is called dollar growth, and it gives you a totally different perspective. And wow, this really illustrates the difference. When you measure it in dollars, all of a sudden India's growth is pretty much on par with the much more mature US economy, and both are still trailing China. That whole fastest growing narrative suddenly gets a lot more complicated. It's a powerful reminder that how you measure things really, really matters. So if the growth story isn't so simple, what about all that excitement from global investors? Well, let's move on and see, because this is where we find a real disconnect between the hype and what's actually happening. I mean, the buzz is absolutely undeniable. You have everyone from hedge fund billionaires to the heads of major global banks saying the same thing. The next decade belongs to India. The public sentiment just couldn't be more positive. And yet, when you ask why more actual money isn't flowing in, these are the real-world obstacles that investors point to again and again. Things like policy uncertainty, red tape, and this nagging fear that the promises made today won't be kept tomorrow. It makes it really tough for them to place those big, long-term debts. And this shows the disconnect perfectly. You have this China plus one idea, right? The hope was that as companies started moving supply chains out of China, India would be the #1 beneficiary. But the reality is that while India has landed some huge wins, like from Apple, other countries like Vietnam and South Korea have been even better at capturing that momentum. It feels like a massive opportunity that hasn't been fully seized. So what's really at the core of this challenge? Well, according to Subhash Garg, it really boils down to one critical area: technology. Just think about the technologies that are driving global growth right now. We're talking about semiconductors, electric vehicles, solar panels, advanced electronics. I mean, this is the stuff that will absolutely define the future of the global economy. So, this brings us to the most important question of all. Does India have the homegrown tech to actually compete and lead in these future-defining sectors? And the sobering answer is not yet. In a lot of these absolutely crucial areas, China is way ahead. Not just of India, but of many Western nations too. This technology deficit is a major barrier, and it makes it incredibly difficult for India to compete on a global scale in manufacturing. China followed a very clear, very effective strategy. First, they invited global tech companies in. Then they incentivized them with incredible deals, cheap land, labor, huge subsidies. Third, and this is the key part, they learned. They absorbed, adopted, and even reverse engineered the technology. And finally, they used all that knowledge to dominate and become the world's factory. So if hype and foreign sentiment aren't enough, what is the real path to sustainable growth? What really fuels an economy? Well, it seems the focus has to shift inward. It's about empowering India's own industries, acquiring technology, developing a skilled workforce, and being truly cost competitive, not just because of subsidies. And maybe most important of all, creating a stable, predictable policy environment where businesses can actually plan for the long term. And let's take a second to remember why all this matters so much. We can talk about trillions of dollars all day, but on a per-person basis, India's need for rapid growth is just immense. Because when you get down to it, it is still a poor country compared to its peers. This isn't just about abstract numbers. It's about creating real prosperity for hundreds of millions of people. And this quote from a former finance secretary is just, well, it's stark. He's basically saying, hey, the things that are really driving global growth, we don't have them yet. So how can we expect to grow faster than everyone else? That's an incredibly blunt assessment that really underscores the urgency of tackling these fundamental challenges. So it all comes down to this one question. Is India's economic future being built on the solid ground of real, fundamental competitiveness or on the shifting sands of hype? The answer to that is what will determine whether the $10 trillion dream becomes a reality. Thanks for watching The Explainer.